Welcome, everyone. On behalf of MIT's Career Advising and Professional Development, thank you for being here today. Many of you know Robin Chase as the co-founder of Zipcar. She's also a Sloan alumni, repeatedly named as one of MIT's most successful alumni of all time. In fact, Time 100 named her as one of the most influential people in 2009, but she's also an avid gardener, knitter, and cook. The reason why we've invited her today to do a Q&A is to get to know her better as a person, her life as an entrepreneur, as well as what is she doing today on a day-to-day basis as she sits on several boards. You will have the opportunity to ask your questions. What drives her to start her own business? How did she go about making the decisions that she made? And what is it about her that made her the successful person that she is today? So please join me to welcome Robin Chase. Hello. Welcome to MIT, Robin. We are so excited to have you here. So I want to get started with what gave you the courage to start a business and launch a company?
I'm sometimes asked what's the hardest decision, and that is the hardest decision. Going from, I had this idea, I'm working on it, I'm talking about it with friends, I'm doing it part-time around the edges, and the hardest thing is to make the jump and say, okay, I'm quitting my day job, this is the thing I'm doing, and that is terrifying. Making that little leap from this is a cool idea to doing it. What gives you the courage, I think, is adoration and enthusiasm for the idea. I was once listening to this public radio piece, and it talked about entrepreneurs. They're working like 100 hours a week, and you have to, like, day and night, and they're working. I was thinking, this was before I'd done my company, and I was just listening to the story and thinking, like, I could never do that. But then when you're doing your own company, you are enthralled with it. You're thinking about it day and night. It's what you want to talk about. It's what you want to do. It's what you want to work on. And the hours are really nothing because it's a total infatuation.
And do you have an idea as to where that enthusiasm might have come from?
It's a great idea. I think, in general, if I was thinking about who make good entrepreneurs, and I want to distinguish startup entrepreneurs versus someone who's in a startup like Uber. So starting from zero, a person who's going to build a company from scratch, is really someone who, during your life, do you watch what the hairdresser does when they cut your hair? Did you ask the dentist, when you're doing my teeth, tell me about that? Or, let me see, I learned I'm looking at that bicycle, I think I could repair that. You need to be a person whose instinct is, I can try that, I could learn that, I could do that, rather than I could hire that. Because when you're starting out, you have absolutely no money, and you've really got to do as many things by yourself or with the 2 or 3 people that you have working with you, and what you don't have is money to hire out. So I was once had a headhunter looking for a position, and it was a question that he asked me, and I thought, wow, that's such an intriguing question. Is all of your first employees and yourself need to be people who think, I don't know how to do that, but I could give it a shot. I can try. Those are things I'm willing to check out or learn about.
So that willingness to try. And so you founded Zipcar at the age of 42. Where did that idea come from?
Given that this is a career day, there's one thing I wanted to, because I was putting myself back in your shoes. So one thing I really wanted to bring up, and how'd you open this? There was this sentence that I got from someone, which was, my father had one job in his lifetime. I'll have 5 jobs in my lifetime. See? Just let's take the top
I'm
right
struggling.
off. Let's take the top off. I'll just say, and I'll have 5 jobs in my lifetime, and my children will have 5 jobs at the same time. And I feel that we've really moved to a different world. Isn't that hilarious? These are great. These, if I turned it upside down, it probably would still spill. So I just wanted to say, at 42, I did this startup, and it was successful. But where you guys are today is thinking, what do I want to do with my life? What am I interested in? What am I good at? You know, what's the next job going to be? And I just wanted to make sure that I communicate to you that I have had different careers in my lifetime. And when I got out of undergraduate and when I got out of Sloan, I think I had a direction in that I only wanted to do things that I thought would improve the quality of the world. It didn't need to be an environmental improvement, but I really just working and making money to get rich has never been an interest of mine. And I didn't want to spend my 40 or 60 hours a week doing it. But when I got out of Sloan, so I just want to give you the optionality of doing lots of different things and recognizing that over the course of your life, you will likely completely change fields. So I did public health for many years, international public health for many years, and I went to Sloan and I came back out and I did international public health. And Zipcar, as transportation, was something I knew nothing at all about. And so I guess another piece I want to communicate is if you're going to do something incredibly disruptive, if you're within the industry, you have all these preconceptions about what works and what doesn't work and what kind of skills you have to have and all sorts of things about why it won't work. And I will say that people in the car rental industry, for sure, thought this was a completely implausible, never going to work, stupid idea. And people in the auto industry also thought there's no market for that. And I believe strongly that it was because I was a complete outsider and I knew nothing about transportation, which made investors have heart attacks. And my sentence is, everyone knows how to run a fleet. Like universities have fleet departments and police departments have fleet departments. Fleet knowledge is something I can get. Like, don't worry about the fact I know nothing about cars. That's irrelevant. So you have to have answers to investors. But I just want to, if I think about Zipcar, it was something that I personally wanted to have in my life. That I was living in Cambridge. I had 3 kids, 1 car that my husband would use for his job, which was out on 128. And I knew, living in Cambridge, that I did not want to have a second car. I didn't want to have to park it on street or off street or repair it or maintain it or snow shovel it or any of that stuff. I only wanted it a couple hours. And I also knew, having come out of Sloan, that this is what the internet was made for. This is in 2000. This is what the internet was made for, sharing very specific resources among lots of people. And this is what wireless technology would make possible, that I could make the reservations online and send that to the car to unlock the right car at the right time for the right person. And all of that came in an aha moment when my co-founder said, oh, I've seen some shared cars in Berlin when she was on vacation. She's German. And really the second she said it to me, I really understood the technology implications. And until we did it, it was kind of done in a very low-tech co-op, in a kind of big book like your hairdresser might have, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., whatever. And so people would make phone calls and check, and the person would do it. So we really applied technology to this potentiality, made it a mainstream in a big volume business.
Yeah.
Was the innovation insight. And there's a lot of things that need to get done in the world today, and there's a lot of new ways to do it. So
it was a personal problem that you were experiencing. And then so after you started Zipcar, one of the early moments that you started, you made a pricing miscalculation that then nearly sank the company. How did you go about solving that?
So we talked, when I started, about the hardest part of doing a startup is actually doing it. But then, as you do your startup, if I was giving my startup talk, I would tell you that something that's really important is to be intellectually honest, meaning I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. Mm-hmm. I can see problems in my company and I recognize those are problems. And so this is an example of that. And just one sentence more before I tell the story. Why do startups ever succeed? Because they can move so much more quickly than a big company can. And so you can become a learning machine and see a problem and address it as fast as you can. Mm-hmm. And so this was an early example of that. So my co-founder talked to me in a cafe in Cambridge, Andala in Central Square, since you guys are all here. And I said, wow, great idea, I'm on it. That was September. And all through the fall, I did research and I wrote a business plan. And I did a lot of price modeling. No one had ever rented a car by the hour and by the day, so there wasn't any price points I could go to. So I did a lot of modeling. We launched the company in June of the next year. I started, and 3 months in, we had like 20 cars, 450 members, and I could begin to see, was my business model accurate? And I was just about to close my first seed round of $1.3 million. And so I had my colleague who was from MIT, a graduate student, and I said, okay, Jim, let's look at the numbers and how it comes out with the business model. Given this amount of usage, how much money are we making? And we were making about half of what I was telling investors and telling myself that we were going to make. So what did I do? We were still working out of my house. I went into my bedrooms, shut the curtains, and cried for 2 hours. And I just want you guys, go to MIT. Like you think yourself smart. You've been successful. And when you get bad grades, it's only you that knows. No one else knows. And I was just sitting there in my bedroom thinking, oh my God, all my friends know about this. All the people I've talked to in the city know about it. Like everyone I care about knows that I'm doing this startup, and it's a complete lie. It's a complete house of cards, and people talk about doing their startups, and they make it seem like, oh, so easy. I just went out and I got all this money, and I just did this thing. And it was not easy. Mm-hmm. It was just like this terrible, terrible thing. So my colleagues knocked on my door and said, Robin, come out. We discussed and we looked at it. And what had happened is I had put a daily rate that was way too low. Because when you're looking at this, you don't know what fraction of the day is going to be rented by the hour and which fraction of day is going to be rented by the day. No one had ever done this. Mm-hmm. And so I had placed too low a price point. And so I said to my colleagues, we need to raise the rate by 20%. And they said to me, Robin, we have 435 people, many of whom have sold their cars, given this price point promise that you've made. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, that's great, but we will be bankrupt and out of business, and I'm not going to do it. And so I sent out an email, which was really hard to write and send, and I said, mm-hmm. I screwed up, I made a mistake. Mm-hmm. And when I walked in the next morning, my colleague was sitting in the office, because we'd moved to our new offices, and he said, Robin, 2 against you and 19 for you. So I'd gotten all these emails in, and 19 people said, no, we always thought it was too cheap. No worries, it's great, we still love you. And 2 people said, I'm going to tell everyone in the press and all my friends you're a terrible liar and you're rotten. And so then I called those 2 up, and I turned them around. And one of them became one of our prime customer talking to the press people, because the service was so great. But basically, you have to learn fast, mm-hmm. because there's no point running a company that's going to go into the ground. And I will look at Uber that's lost billions of dollars, and continue to believe that.
Yeah, no, that intellectual honesty, that must have been very hard for you to...
I also just think that we have career day here. This is about careers, that you also look at founding CEOs or founders, and what are you good at, and know what you're not good at. And you want to hire to complement you. And I felt like I was ever vigilant for when am I not going to be the right person to be the CEO of this company? And if you want to succeed, you need to know your strengths and your weaknesses, as I say, and hire and fill them in.
Yeah. And what do you think in terms of your hiring decisions over the years? How did you go about finding the right partner, the right investors, the right team?
Everyone, when you're starting out around investors, will say, oh, you've got to get the right investors. Like, make sure you get those right investors. And I think, if I had a choice, I would get to choose right investors. But basically, I need money. It's green. I can spend it. That's my investor. And so people are saying, don't choose that VC or choose this VC or choose. And I think, if I had a choice, that'd be great. So basically, if you were willing to give me money, I said yes to invest with me. Around employees, one of the joys that I found when I was started from, as I say, from zero, is that you can hire a lot of people by the hour because you only need them by the hour. And when you pay someone by the hour, then you can figure out, are they good at what they do? Like, is this kind of skills I need? And so I would say almost all staff started as part-time before I had the money to hire them full-time. And then you do make bad decisions. And one of the questions on that piece of paper was, like, what are some of the hardest decisions? And I'd say the hardest decisions are having to fire people is the absolute rock bottom, worst, hardest thing. And particularly when they're good people. But when you have a very small company, you can't place someone into another place. You only have money to have 5 or 7 or 10 staff members, and if it's the wrong person and you completely screwed it up. So anyway, hiring is hard. In general, hiring is hard.
And you are today a board member in several organizations. If you were to look back at the businesses that you've started and you were to give them an advice, what advice would you give to yourself?
So this question, and then you have another one. What would you change if you want to go back? I want to say that when we talk about the advice I would give myself is stay intellectually honest. That's really important. But also have more confidence in your intuition. So I think I knew what I was talking about, and my intuition was good, but I'm very fearful of giving that advice to people because it really needs to be paired with intellectual honesty. So I really was constantly thinking, is this something I do know about? If I don't know about it, I'm going to go talk to people who do know about it. But there are things like hiring some wrong people that I got persuaded to do by investors because they said, oh, you can't do this. And I think, you're thinking I need this person, so I'm going to do this for you, but it's not something I think I need. So in general, I would tell myself to have more confidence. But the thing I want you, going back and thinking, did I make some bad decisions? Yeah, I've made bad decisions in my life. But to put myself back in the place where I was at those moments, I just urge you, as I urged myself, to make decisions based on as much input as I could, to educate myself as well as I could, and then to make my best choices. So I can't regret. Like, I did the best I could. And if I'd been a crummy, lazy person, then I could have a lot of regrets. But I tried really hard, and I tried to get the best advice I could get. So I can't regret decisions that did turn out to be the wrong ones. I mean, I really worked at it.
Yeah. Great. And we're going to open it up for questions in a few minutes. So get started on thinking what you want to ask Robin. But I have more questions. I think many of us here, we are at a transitory period of our lives trying to figure out which industry we want to go to and to make an impact. You pioneered the collaborative economy, and you definitely encourage more businesses over the years, Uber, Lyft. Where do you think it's heading to next? Is the future of car sharing?
If I think from a transportation perspective, the future is urban, and in our urban lives, we'll be leading multimodal lives, meaning private car ownership should be for the very few rich and elite, and they should be paying a huge amount of money for that. And the bulk of us will be saying, okay, where do I need to go and how am I going to get there? And am I going to walk? Am I going to take a bike? Am I going to take an e-bike, transit? When I need a car, I'll take a car. But basically, each trip will be the mode that you need. Mm-hmm. And if I think about you guys choosing careers and where I personally spend my time and the few investments that I make, is that we are at a pivotal point in humanity and addressing climate change and sustainability and how many people we can have alive on this planet. So the things that I'm interested in and the things that I want my children to be interested in and you to be interested in is, if you're thinking about a startup, does this belong in a sustainable and equitable economy? Because we need to go from where we are today, which is a fossil fuel-soaked economy that has no future, into the place we need to go. Mm-hmm. And so I'm uninterested in wasting, so a lot of people, let's say 5 years ago, everyone was sending me parking apps, and I think, I don't care about parking. Parking is so uninteresting to me. Cars don't belong in cities. I'm not going to waste one breath of my life thinking about parking. But so when you're thinking about your ideas, we have a huge number of problems to solve in this world, and I think the status quo has got us to this miserable place that we're in right now. And so there's this huge opportunity for what is the world we want to live in. And I have this sentence that I've said is that at Zipcar, I created the world I wanted to live in. I created the world where people are mostly good and I can trust them and they can do these things. Mm-hmm. But you should be taking jobs and thinking of things that are creating the world you want to live in, because we create that every day at a time, and we have this gigantic, biggest transition ever to be making right now. So it's the guys who know things brought us to this point, so don't listen to what they have to say. It's you guys with a new future. I think it's, yeah.
Great. So who would like to ask the first question?
Thanks for sharing. I have a specific Zipcar-related question. So I've
been
using since 2009 when I was in college. And I've always wondered, when you were just starting, right, how did you get into the university campuses? And with a dedicated space and sign and stuff, I just thought about the business problem, and it's just so daunting to me to really get started on those partnerships.
That's an excellent question, and I'm amused by it because I use that as an example. I wrote a book called Peers, Inc., How People and Platforms Are Creating the Collaborative Economy, or something like that. I can't even remember the longer title. And one of the examples I use is, so I think about excess capacity a lot and how to leverage excess capacity. One of the first 5 cars we had for Zipcar was parked in an MIT lot. And people thought that I was really interested in getting a parking space for free. Instead of paying $120 a month, I was going to be able to get it for free at MIT. That was interesting, but way more interesting was getting MIT to send out an email to 35,000 faculty, students, and staff to say, wow, there's this cool new service on campus, and this is what it is. Because that, for me, was something I couldn't buy, and for them, cost them nothing. And so I felt that that was an example of excess capacity. And I would say MIT, for 100% certainty, has been able to build at least one parking garage less because of Zipcar. Like, the number of cars we've taken off of this campus or out of this community is phenomenal. But so for each of my users, but I want to make this broader, suppliers. So I had written for myself a one-pager on why Zipcar is fantastic for universities, and one-pager on why it's fantastic for car companies, because I'm aggregating 10% usages into one person. Why? So I had very strong arguments and use cases for each of the people I was going to be having, each of the sectors I was going to have to be dealing with as part of my startup argumentation. And then, as we went along, I could and I would communicate to Harvard and MIT and to the city of Cambridge, here's how many parking spots and parking garages you don't have because we've taken this many cars off of the roads. And I'd say Kendall Square is another amazing example that there's been so much growth without the car traffic and car parking. And I won a fancy award 3 years ago, and I got these numbers, and now I have to remember them because when I gave this talk. But I think the city of Cambridge, I think it's something like 30% of adults have a Zipcar membership in the city of Cambridge, and the number of cars we've taken out of the research statistic from UC Davis is each car-sharing parking space car takes 10 vehicles 10 private cars out. So it's a huge win. But these are all statistics that we have today that we had to research and tell people about. Yeah.
Thanks for the talk. It was really interesting. I read a case study that was written on Zipcar. It was pretty interesting. It was like a story. It mentioned a couple of challenges for the investors and also for the hiring team that you had, you hired somebody experienced and you had to let them go. So I wanted to ask you these specific challenges wherein you had to convince your stakeholders about a certain action that you're taking. Were there any challenges that were simply because of the gender or because you're a female entrepreneur, and how did you tackle those?
So that Harvard Business School case is one of their most used of all time, and they teach it to every first-year student. And the first time the case was taught, I was in the classroom, and they had boards just like this, and the professor had on that board why I would not invest in Robin, and on this side was why I would invest in Robin. And then the 90 students are chatting, and I'm sitting listening, and the why I would not invest was like this, and why I would invest in Robin was like 2, 3. And when I listened to them, I was so shocked to hear this outside assessment, because in my own self, I thought, I don't know anything about cars. Who cares about cars? But all of my jobs up to now, I've been the number 2 person who the CEO has relied upon beyond anyone else. Like, I can do finance, and I can do marketing, and I can do operations, and I'm really good at these things, and I feel confident and great. And the people who were investing in me were, I love this part of the story, the early investors, they were classmates who had heard me talk on public radio, who called me up. They were friends who knew me really well. They were my former employers. And so I'd say people who know me, those angel investors are people who really know me, and they're saying, I'm putting my money on Robin. And so and the investors back in that moment, they would say, I just can't even get you guys back into that moment. In 2000, 50% of people had internet access, and it was at work. 25% of people had cell phones. And so we were proposing this thing that was all online, and so the investors would say, well, is this a consumer brand, or is it a technology company, or no one's ever done anything in transportation? Like, it was just outside of every box they ever had. And then this gender issue, which I want to say I completely downplayed at that moment. I didn't believe it was an issue, but I would tell you today in hindsight, 100% it was an enormous issue. And so my advice to anybody, and I also want to say that I grew up in the Middle East and in Africa, and I lived in cities that had very poor infrastructure and services. And so as I was building Zipcar, I was constantly feeling and appreciating my privilege, as in, wow, I can mail a letter and it will get there. I can go downtown and copy something and copy business plans and send them out. I can have roads that are like, so I was constantly feeling that, but I will say that the MIT name, I could get into any VC on the back of the fact that I just graduated from Sloan, which was crazy. But I think you can get, whatever the reason you get into the door, you only get one meeting. And so when you're in that meeting, you have to be knowledgeable, skilled, like know what you're talking about, which is the same thing 3 ways. But that's how you get the second meetings. Mm-hmm. And so if I think about women in the venture world, I think male VCs are not trying, they aren't thinking that they think less of you. But there's this instant bond with the man that's walking in. Like, we went to the same schools, we both love baseball. Like, I can relate to how I was when I was 25 or 42. Just as I have a special bond with women CEOs or people who have children. Like, so I want to say there are these special bonds, and that means that venture capitalists and angel investors can feel a proximity much, much more quickly for someone that is like them than someone who's not like them. So you have to work harder at creating that bond of trust that just does, with stereotypes, just happens to this other piece. Any other questions?
So one thing that inspires me about Zipcar is that it reduces wastes and, like you said, takes advantage of excess capacity. And so I'm wondering if I can pick your brain a little and let me know where else you might see opportunities to solve that problem.
The problem of?
Excess capacity, unnecessary waste.
I would encourage you guys to go read my book, which you can get at a library maybe, or online, because I talk a lot about that. And I would say for a while it was my complete joy to be constantly walking around and seeing excess capacity everywhere and thinking about it. And it's a really fun mind game, particularly if you're thinking about doing a startup, to be walking around and seeing what you see. So is it something that's time of day, or is it something around, access to data, or networks, or life experiences, or whatever? So one of the startups I did after Zipcar was that I'm still totally fascinated with is in spectrum and radio waves and all of our devices that we're carrying around that can both send and receive data. So I was totally fascinated with mesh networking and how there's all this excess capacity in all our devices and how we could leverage that. Right now, cities are increasingly doing congestion. They're increasingly talking about doing congestion pricing. And as we move more cars to electric vehicles, we're going to have to start charging for user fees that we can't get gas taxes, we can't get fuel taxes, so we have to tax cars in other ways, which will be by distance. So as I think about what is the technology needed to do that, I've thought how it's done today is they build these big gantries all around London or Milan or Stockholm or New York City that they're talking about, it's going to cost $300 million to build just the hard infrastructure. And it is maddening to me because what was Uber but congestion pricing? Like, it varies by time of day and by distance and by every road. Like, everyone's got a cell phone in their pocket, yet we're going to spend $300 million on this crazy piece of infrastructure to charge cars to cross a line or to charge us by distance. So I'm kind of fascinated. That's something that I'm totally fascinated by. I think there's a huge amount of goodwill out there. If I think of the whole gig economy piece that has been are we taking advantage of people or not taking advantage of people? And I think it can be done in a way where you're not taking advantage of people and where it really is a shared value proposition. And so I think there's more things that can be done in that. And if I think about public policy in general, what are more ways we can build community economies on the back of things that are used communally rather than a consumption economy of physical goods where there is no future for a consumption economy to, I think consumption economies are dead. So what are the types of economies, what types are service economies or sharing economies or cultural economies that need to be built?
Thanks so much for everything. It's been great. So you spoke earlier about intellectual honesty, knowing what you can't do. But I'm curious, as you thought about Zipcar being disruptive innovation, finding mentors and advisors, how did you go about finding those mentors and determining if that advice was actually good advice for Zipcar?
I have this metaphor that I've thought of is that entrepreneurs are like blind, naked mole rats. And you're under the ground, and you're trying to find your way out, like up. And you're like scrabbling, you like dig this little tunnel, and it's like a dead end, and you go back, and then you dig a tunnel this way, and it's a dead end, you go back. And then when you get to the light, when you get to the surface, and then you look back, you say, oh man, that was like, look at that straight shot tunnel, ignoring all the millions of dead ends. So if I think about how did I find mentors, when I was doing Zipcar, I gave myself carpal tunnel from talking on the phone so long, and I had to get myself headsets. And every person I met, they would say, oh, you should talk to blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Like, I spent the first 4 months meeting, talking, because I didn't know about a whole bunch of things, like a ton of things I didn't know about. Over the course of all of that, there are people that you have good chemistry with, that you like, that you call up again. They're happy to give you advice. I think there are some people, if I think about things I didn't like that happened at Zipcar, where I did take advice of people that I shouldn't have trusted. And so again, you can look back and think, when you know nothing, you're doing the best you can, right? So there's people who I trusted, and they are friends today, early investors who gave me great advice. And there's some early investors who were horrible and gave me self-interested advice that I didn't perceive. So to that point, many people will tell you that your board and your investors have aligned interests, but that is not true. Because for you as an entrepreneur, you have your one company that you're doing, and they have 10 or 100 of which 90% are going to fail. And so they're going to push everybody to go as fast as they can, as whatever, and a bunch of them are going to go by the wayside. But you have your one idea. You have your one thing. And they have their reputations that they're trying to protect. And they've got these other things. So I'd say after the fact, there are some board members that I feel like, wow, the advice you gave me was really not best advice for the company, but it was best advice for you personally. And so that would be my advice, is to recognize when people are giving you self-interested advice, or to figure out, because everyone says, as I say, people say that investors and board members are working for you, but just look behind and look a little deeper, because some might be giving you great advice.
You graduated from the MBA program here, and what do you think is the most important thing you learned from the MBA? And also for someone who wants to start a business, be an entrepreneur, how necessary or useful is it to get an MBA?
No one's from Sloan here right now.
You have two professors as well.
I want to say getting an MBA is irrelevant if, here's the big if, my undergraduate was at Wellesley, and I majored in English, French, and philosophy, one of 2 triple majors ever. And I went to a liberal arts school, and I think the last time I had taken math was in 10th grade when I went to Sloan. And I knew what I didn't have confidence in, and so I wanted to go to Sloan over Harvard for sure, because I wanted to have a very quantitative, and I took hard finance, not baby finance, and I took options, and I took all the hard math classes. And what Sloan gave me was a belief in my own ability to learn, and a belief that you're going to throw these fancy words around and all this stuff, but A, I might already know that word because I went to Sloan, or B, I can go figure that out and learn that, so I'm not going to be intimidated by you. So really, what the MIT gave me, so that's what it gave me personally, was a sense of self-confidence around manipulating numbers and spreadsheets and learning. But I do have to say, which I said once already, that having gone to Sloan, you are now in this larger group of elite business school graduates. And so when I was doing Zipcar, I did talk to some Harvard Business School professors for advice. And it said, I'm working on this startup, and I'm a Sloan, and they were the experts in pricing, and so I talked to them. And they took my phone call, they took my emails, and they took my phone calls. So I feel very ambivalent about this advice. Like, you guys are all sitting here, and you went to MIT, and you're getting that amazing, amazing check next to your name. But I'm 64 years old, and I've hired a ton of fantastic people who did not go to an Ivy League school. So it's giving you a place of privilege that you will and should take advantage of, but when you are out hiring other people, remember that you aren't that smart, right? Like, you did feel how amazing I got in. You're just a regular person.
And we have about 10 minutes left, so maybe one more question and then some closing remarks.
Closing remarks.
Sorry, I'll try to make this one a bit more short. Just out of curiosity, what type of work are you doing now, and what boards are you involved with?
Right now, when I think about which boards I've been saying yes to, which you don't want to be on too many, and which I've been on, they're all engaged in this future play. So I just got off a board after 12 years of the World Resources Institute. It was a nonprofit, but they're doing international, global environmental work. And so I spent a lot of time with that. I'm on the board of a public company called Tucows that the reason I'm on that board, I got asked, and I'm now chairman of the board, and I've been on that board maybe 6 or 7 years, and the reason I said yes was, one, they're a very high ethics company that is famous for its excellent customer service, but a place they're evolving into now is building fiber to the home, and the future, in my view, requires quality internet access for everybody everywhere. And so I'm happy to spend time making that happen. I'm also on a sustainability advisory board for a huge Dutch multinational company that you guys should go look at for inspiration. It's called DSM. It's now just DSM. And they were once a mining company, a Royal Dutch mining company, and then they sold assets and changed, and now they've just changed more for the last few years, but they are, I'd say, one of the leading companies in the world for how to build a net zero company with 22,000 employees and a ton of investment. Like, how do you build that into products and executive compensation and suppliers. It's like a really complicated task, and it's very inspirational to be working with them and on that. I've been saying no to a lot of transportation boards because I give a lot of advice in cities and to countries, and I wanted to be able to say that I am a disinterested party, that I'm not trying to push something that I don't know about, that I'm in and have a stake in. I think I'd be interested in being on one or two more boards, but again, it really requires companies that are part of the new sustainable economy. And otherwise, I'm not interested.
Oh. Well, thank you, Robin, for sharing with us the importance of resilience and intellectual honesty and having that drive to make the world a better place. It certainly gave us all a lot to think about as we continue our education here at MIT. And thank you to everyone who have come to participate. We couldn't have done it without your engagement.
I have one more thing I want to say.
Oh, yes. Is there anything else you would like to share?
One more thing.
Please.
So I really believe deep in my heart that you as individuals are the right person to participate in either starting or being in specific companies. Meaning that if let's go to Zipcar, I was the right person for that because I had my 3 kids and my husband, and I lived in an urban area, and I lived in Boston, and I'd been to Sloan, and I knew about technology. And so I was the right person to bring that forward. And each of you has a very specific life experience and a very specific set of knowledge that is unique and incredibly valuable for the right idea. And I really, really believe that. I had a fellowship at Harvard a while ago, and one of my peers was doing stuff in real estate. And she had this sentence that they teach in real estate, which is, what do you put on this plot of land? You build it to its highest and best use. And so the challenge I'm going to put to you, that I put to myself, and I put on my children, and my children say it's too hard a burden, but I'm doing it anyway, is you should think about, in this particular moment, what is your personal highest and best use? And that will change over the course of your life. So when I was having my 2 children, and they were really young, and I was very ambitious, it made me so angry that I was having to make this choice between raising these dang stupid children and not doing this other thing. But at that particular moment, at the age that I was, at that particular moment, with the children at this age, those were the right decisions to make. So it will change over time, and now I'm 64, and what is my highest and best use, which I'm constantly trying to figure out. So I want you to think about that, but think about that in a positive way, in that you are bringing with you all of yourself to this moment, and your interest to this moment, and your interest to this moment, and that's where you should be going.
And with that, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.